Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in.
Welcome back. This week it is just myself and PozzA because Kelly is off gallivanting around the world with her family. She'll be back next week, but you'll just have to put up with just PozzA and I for now because there is so much to talk about in the world of silly season. We are going to be dropping 2 podcasts this week so that we can sort of stay on schedule, because last week we did say that we were going to be doing the Moto3 and Moto2 mid-year review, which we are still doing. It's just going to come out maybe Thursday, maybe Wednesday, but we'll just wait and see. But first, there's so much to talk about in regards to silly season. This weekend, they were testing after the race, and a lot of riders didn't get out and test. But just before this weekend, we got the news that I suppose everybody was expecting. In fact, I don't think I've met anyone that this has come as a shock to. And that is the news that Pedro Acosta will be back in orange at factory KTM. He is ousting Jack Miller because Brad Binder does have a contract until 2026. Everyone is saying that Jack Miller has been offered a gas ride, but he's undecided if he will take it. PozzA, what are your thoughts about this?
Obviously, being Australian, I am a very big Jack Miller fan, so it is kind of sad, but I do completely understand the sort of logic behind getting Acosta in. Just he looks like he could be one of the best riders possibly ever, possibly just since Prime Marquez. But the kid's got potential. You can't really deny that. So I can see and absolutely expected also him to sign for the factory team for next year. Just it sort of seems this year as a whole, the whole of KTM apart from Acosta have sort of been underperforming. So they'll hope they can turn that around for next year. But yeah, I do think Miller should take the gas ride personally, just because KTM they still value him. They're still talking about how he's been helping out the development and all of that. And outside of KTM, I don't think he has that many really good options that are sort of like really pursuing him. I think the only other sort of big manufacturer that's going after him is Honda, and it's sort of a question whether he wants to have a go at trying to fix the Honda or just stick to KTM and see if he can make anything of that.
I think I'd have a bit more sympathy towards Jack if he was performing a bit better this year. Last year, we still saw him get podiums, and this year, he really has been absolutely nowhere. I agree with you completely, though. Pedro Acosta's the correct choice for that seat. You can't sleep on Acosta, and he could be the rider to give KTM that world championship. If it's going to be anyone, I think it's going to be him. And yeah, this is one part of silly season that wasn't unpredictable. The next part of silly season you could see coming, I suppose, but also came as a huge shock because coming into Mugello, all the reports were that Jorge Martin had signed for Ducati as a factory rider. Fast forward a little bit to later on in the weekend, there's some slight murmurings, and I don't know if it's because Jorge Martin crashed out of the sprint or if it's because Marc Marquez said that Pramac wasn't an option. But fast forward to the test, and Aprilia released a post, and this post apparently came 20 minutes after Jorge Martin had signed with them, because in 2025, Jorge Martin is going to be a factory Aprilia rider. And I could ramble honestly about this for so long. So we're going to let Poz go first so that, I don't talk everyone's ear off.
Yeah, the news that Martin signed for Aprilia was sort of a shock to everyone because obviously we were told it was pretty much signed, sealed, delivered that he'd be at Ducati. But from what I've seen, it does seem like Ducati had the contract on the table, ready for Martin to sign, and they pulled it off the table last minute just because Marquez said that he wouldn't want to ride at Pramac, which at that point you can sort of understand Martin signing probably sort of the next deal that came in, just sort of thinking, well, if Ducati aren't going to sign me, I'll just go somewhere else that clearly want him. I do still think that I think it's a good signing for both Aprilia and Martin. I think the Aprilia could suit him really well, and excited to see what he can do on it next year.
One thing I do just want to jump in on one of your points was that you can see why Martin did this. Allegedly, and this is just based on some reports, Ducati told him that, they were going to wait for Marquez, or that signed Marquez, and within 20 minutes, Massimo Rivola was on the phone to the big boss at the Piaggio group saying that we've got a chance. So it really does seem like Jorge Martin was told either we need to wait or Marquez is signed, and he literally just went straight to Aprilia. And I think that is such, a Jorge Martin thing to do. One thing to note is that this deal for Martin and Aprilia happened so quickly, they forgot to tell Maverick Vinales. And Maverick Vinales found out via social media. I think that would hurt Vinales quite a bit. So it'll be interesting to see if he makes any statement on it, or if he stays quiet, if that plays into his moves in silly season. But definitely dropping the ball a little bit there. Just like a friendly text to Vinales would have probably been a smart move. But this whole Martin going straight to Aprilia is such a Martin thing to do, and I can completely understand it. Whether I agree with it or not, because I'll be straight up, I think Ducati have picked the wrong rider here, and that's coming from me, a massive Marc Marquez fan. I think they're looking at the short term only. Jorge Martin's still quite young. Enea Bastinini's quite young. And they've got so much potential. And all of that potential and all of that experience that they worked so hard to steal from KTM in regards to Jorge Martin, they've just sort of thrown it out the window. And that Aprilia is a race winning bike, so they're going to make next year a bit harder for themselves, I think. But do you think they picked the right rider, or?
I completely agree with you in what you're saying about Ducati not really looking for the future. It just doesn't really make sense to me with how hard they did work to steal Martin off KTM. He was probably brought up maybe a year too early. I'm not saying that he wasn't performing straight away, he did, but that's probably what KTM were going for, sort of giving him another year in Moto2, let him have a title fight. But yeah, it still don't really understand the whole thinking behind it on Ducati's side. I do understand Martin sort of he's been waiting to get the factory seat for a number of years now, and as soon as it's on the table, he's probably about to sign it. They turn around and say, "No, we need to wait a little bit longer." I do completely understand him turning around and signing for a manufacturer that obviously have their sights set on him and actively want him to sign for them. That being said, I do still think Marc will be successful next year, maybe the year after. But yes, Martin's not Martin's not even in the prime of his career yet. I don't think he's still 26. Still got plenty of world championship fighting years left in him. So if I was Ducati, I would have just invested in the future. Because if Marc wanted a factory ride, his only other real option was Aprilia. So I do sort of think they should have just let Marc go, see if, because they know they have the best bike. So I think they should have just let Marc go off, think he's making a mistake leaving us and just back the riders that they've had for a number of years and invested in.
And if the listeners didn't gather from you and I rambling away, Marc Marquez, a few days after this Aprilia news came out, it was announced that he is the rider that will be going to factory Ducati alongside Pecco Bagnaia. And it did start me thinking basically along exactly what you've just said. The fact that what is Marc Marquez worth? Yes, he's worth so much money in regards to sponsorship and the storyline that we could potentially be seeing here, because arguably the best rider on the best bike again. I would actually, though, make a case for Jorge Martin. I do think he's the fastest rider on the grid at the moment. Maybe he's not quite the complete package that you see in someone like Pecco Bagnaia, but he's definitely ridiculously fast. I just also think that having Martin and Bagnaia as teammates would probably be a much safer bet for Ducati than having Pecco and Marc as teammates. They've already clashed this year. Obviously, there's the whole VR46 Academy and Marc Marquez non-beef that happens. It just has so much more potential to explode. Not to mention, yeah, I feel completely sorry for Martin here. Well, not completely sorry. He has just become a factory rider, which is something he's always wanted. But he's basically been screwed over by Ducati twice, if not 3 times, if we think about the end of last year. He's done absolutely everything right, and for him to be leading this world championship, for him to have come second last year, and for Ducati still to turn around and say, oh, nah, we're going to go with Marc Marquez, there's got to be something in Marquez's data, or just something extra that they're seeing. Because, yeah, to pass over someone who's done and is doing so well and has done everything right, it's just really a tough pill to swallow. And yeah, I really hope Martin does super well on the Aprilia. But let's look at Marc Marquez a bit more, because he's not won a race yet. Surely Sachsenring is going to be his. Like, I can tell you now that already my predictions are going to be Marc Marquez and Marc Marquez doing the double for the Sachsenring, because you'd be a bit of a fool to bet against him. But we could genuinely see another 2019. Best rider on the best grid, and I do have to wonder if our only hope for that not to happen is in Pedro Acosta, because Pecco Bagnaia is amazing, to be sure, but Marc Marquez is built a bit differently. Martin's going to take some time to get up to speed on that Aprilia, and if rumours are to be believed, it looks like Enea Bastinini, who's just been outed of his seat by Marc Marquez, will be going to Gas KTM, which is another big player, and it means that at the very least, Ducati, in signing Marc Marquez, will have lost Enea Bastinini and Jorge Martin. And you've got to wonder if it was worth it. But what do you see for Enea Bastinini and what his future might hold?
Yeah, in Bastianini's case, it's sort of the same for all the unsigned riders right now. It's a bit messy. They could go practically anywhere. But I would like to see him go to Gas. I'd like to see a pairing of Bastianini and Miller at Tech 3 next year. I just think Ducati, they haven't really given Bastianini a proper chance on the factory ride just yet. Obviously, he was injured for most of last year, came back, won a race at Sepang, and they've given him like 6 or 7 races this year before replacing him. So I do think it'd be nice to see him go to a different manufacturer. It could be quite similar to what he did at Gresini in 2022 and to a degree the Avintia in 2021, being on the satellite bike, not having as much pressure on you. Uh, Hopefully he can perform really well next year wherever he goes, but I would like to see him at Gas Gas.
I actually don't want to see him at Gas Gas. I want to see Maverick Vinales take up that Honda offer and then Aprilia pull like the biggest coup of the season and sign both Jorge Martin and Enea Bastinini, because I think that pairing of two uh, jilted riders who are so angry and frustrated at what happened at Ducati, being on a bike that admittedly isn't the most reliable bike in the world, but they do seem to be working so hard on their reliability issues. I just think it would be so sensational for the storyline. Although we do already have so much incredible stories coming through this season, and now we'll be, dwelling into next. I just think that would be quite incredible. And I'm just going to pause the recording now.
Just building on your point of how you want to see the grid turning up. If Bastianini doesn't end up going to Tech 3, I feel like that could open the door for Sergio Garcia to jump up to MotoGP, just because he was in the sort of KTM academy with Gas Gas in Moto 3, and obviously he's performing really well this year. And it's been such a problem in the last few years for the rookies in Moto 2 and like the champions going up, trying to find spaces. Like the last 2 years, we've only had one rookie, so I'd still be completely fine if how you wanted it to play out did end up playing out, and Sergio Garcia did end up getting a GP ride.
I do actually think that if Enea doesn't go to KTM, or if he does, I do think that Miller may take that Honda seat then. So I do definitely still think there's space for Sergio Garcia, because, yeah, he's leading the championship, and I do think there's such a strong case to be made for him in MotoGP. It would be so good to see multiple rookies coming up, obviously with Fermin Aldeguer, who has already signed with Ducati. We're possibly looking at Joe Roberts coming up into Trackhouse. Having 3 rookies would actually be such a good way, to give the benchmark against each other. I think we can probably both agree that Augusto Fernandez is out, because he definitely hasn't shown up this year. And so, yeah, those 2 KTM seats are going to be hotly contested, but I just wonder if Jack Miller wants more of a challenge than, being in a satellite team. I mean, sure, Gas are factory bikes, but it does make me wonder. And then there's also the possibility of Ayagura coming up into LCR and replacing Taka Nakagami. It's just so wild what this silly season might produce. I'm loving it. All this off-track action as well. The final piece of silly season news to touch on is that of Pramac Racing, and I suppose LCR a little bit too, because these 2 manufacturers have not yet signed with Ducati and Honda respectively. There's a lot of speculation about who could go and where they could go. Both LCR and Pramac Racing have been linked to Yamaha. Obviously, Yamaha want a satellite team, and I think it'd be really good for the championship if Pramac went to Yamaha. LCR, I'm in mixed feelings about obviously being an LCR fan. It must be so frustrating to, want to perform in this championship and want to do well and have Honda provide a bike that's just not up to it. So I could totally see LCR switching. Pramac makes the most sense because it sort of levels the playing field a bit more. It gets 2 bikes off Ducati, so they'll move down to 6 bikes. It'd even out the playing field because most manufacturers have had 4. It'd give Yamaha that extra development. So it's just another silly season aspect to keep your eye on. And we will let you know as soon as anything is signed, sealed, and delivered. We want to know your silly season predictions though, because there are so many moving parts in this silly season, anything could still happen. We could see Maverick Vinales go to Aprilia. We could see Maverick Vinales stay at Aprilia or move to Honda. We could see Jack Miller go to Honda. There's just so many open seats. We knew it was going to be spicy. I just wasn't really ready for how spicy it is. So, like and subscribe if you're enjoying this. We're going to be back later in the week talking about our Moto3 and Moto2 winners and losers so far this year, as well as checking in with that championship. So, until then, have a great week.